Welcome to our next What Happens Next interview, one that I'm really excited to be hosting, and I'm going to be super curious today because I'm really fascinated in getting into how we think about money, how we feel about money, and how it fits into the next chapter of our lives and what we should be looking at. But before we do, if this is the first time you're here, welcome to the What Happens Next channel, the channel dedicated to just having better and more nuanced conversations about the next chapter of our lives. In the last 2 weeks, have had 3 or 4 conversations about people who are either approaching or are at their last ever payday, their last ever income stream from full-time work. And it's a nervous time. It's so nervous. And actually, what I realized even more is that at this transition, this change in our life, is a period of our life where we need and we should have all the help we can get. So this channel is designed to help you if you're going through that journey. Just think about it in a more nuanced way. We explore issues that aren't only related to money, we explore issues that are related to health, maintaining intellectual well-being. We talk about loneliness. We talk about social and community well-being. We talk about a wide range of issues, but all dedicated to helping you navigate that next chapter of your life, however that may look like for you. And I'm delighted to have Christine on with me today to share her experience and expertise and help us all navigate what happens next in our lives. Christine, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And I'm really interested in sharing your insights today. So you mentioned before we started recording that you'd had a busy week. And I'm really lucky that I get to go through these client experiences and learn from my clients. What's the one thing you've learned from a client this week that you think that's going to be really useful in my life or the lives of my other clients?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. Okay, so what was the key thing? One thing that I've learned from a client?
Yeah. So the one thing I've learned this week or the last couple of weeks is the one thing I've learned this week is Iceland is really cold. But the one thing I've learned from clients over the last couple of weeks is that last ever full-time payday that people get is a really scary experience, and one I think we underestimate as professionals helping them. So tell me about the one thing you've learned from the work you've been doing with the clients, and how it sort of shifted your perspective marginally.
Oh my gosh. The first thing that really comes to mind is what I've been learning from them over all of these years, really, and right up till this week, is this ongoing pattern relative to worthiness, right? What we believe, right, that we're worthy of, and how unaware we are of its impact, right, and its influence on how we go about making decisions and how that ultimately results in the kind of life, that we're leading, that we're living.
Yeah, and one of the areas that I want to explore today is how to feel more worthy, because I think that would be a really interesting subject. But tell us, I know you, and I've invited you on because I know you're going to give us some fabulous insights. But for those of our audience who don't know you, tell us a bit about you.
Okay. So let's see. So if we go back however many years, 3+ decades worth of a career that's been centered around money, spent 20 years as a traditional, what I would call a traditional financial advisor, then moved into coaching, spent a little bit of time in the nonprofit, world as a legacy officer for a foundation. So regardless of my role and position, it's always had something to do, right, with money and our relationship with it. And even though, I have, I've got degrees, right? A degree in metaphysics. I have a certification in money coaching and so on, right? All of these lovely credentials and so forth, and acquired skill sets. But I think what really impacts the work that I do is what I bring to the table, what I bring to the conversation relative to my own journey, my own life journey, right? And what I have experienced through my own relationship with money, right? The stresses, the struggles, the pains, and even, arriving at a place of acceptance and contentment, right? My experiences with divorce, right? And there's been more than one. My life journey with respect to my experience with surviving breast cancer.
Yeah.
Right. So there's so much, there's so much, I don't know what the right word is. There's so much material there. Right. So I think that's so part of what informs the work that I do with others really comes from
life experience.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so interesting. And what I'm really curious about is that life experience, the stuff that you've gone through, divorce and health challenges, and getting over those challenges and continuing doing the work. I suppose there's two questions. Number one is, and I've been thinking about this a lot, I'm rereading at the minute Bronnie Ware's book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And what I'm thinking about a lot is how health challenges have an impact on our perspective. So the health challenge you went through, how did that change the way you view money?
Oh, how I view money? Oh my gosh. So it's so funny that you bring this up. I was literally just talking about this the other day, or maybe it was last week or what have you, but it's very recent. I remember, oh gosh. All right. So it's going to be a bit of a story here to give it some context, right? So part of my journey with cancer meant I had to go through chemotherapy. And in one of my first sessions, actually, I think it was my first infusion, right, where you're receiving the chemo. And actually, just leading up to that, I was thinking about my health insurance. And I have a high deductible plan, which meant I had to come up with thousands of dollars just to get in the door. And I remember just posing the question to myself, okay, well, if we believe in there's a will, there's a way. And if I have trust and faith, right, and I'm fully capable, I'll be able to figure this out. And not so much just figure it out, but the solution will be presented to me and I will be aware enough to take notice.
Okay.
Right? So a little bit different than intellect and logic, right? It's really this trust and faith component. And that's been something that a lifelong journey, of mine, right? A more spiritual inclination. So I knew, all right, and I had made the phone calls and they said, okay, well, just to go to your first infusion, you just need a deposit of $250 and then you'll receive a bill. And then, of course, I do my homework. How much is the cost of one infusion? One infusion was upwards of $10,000. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Right. But I'm there to focus on righting my health.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to describe this. So I have a daily practice, right, that I take myself through just to help myself stay centered and calm. and tap into that place of faith and trust. And I arrived at my infusion as I'm all hooked up, right? So chemo's going in, and I had my girlfriend keeping me, company, and we've got activities to take up the 3-hour time slot. So I look to the right, because you're like kind of sectioned off. It's all open, but you're sectioned off, and it's one of those walls where you can put push pins in and hang up paper, right?
Yeah.
So this little piece of paper, no bigger than an index card. In fact, I think it was an index card with a little thumbtack. And I looked at it and it caught my eye. And it said, it had something to do with the foundation, right? That they have a foundation to help individuals cover these costs.
Right.
And I was like, so I asked my girlfriend, I said, can you like unpin that, like hand it over to me? Seriously, it was a little piece of paper. And there it was. I think her name was Catherine or something. Call Catherine at this number. She was actually downstairs. Long story short, she runs upstairs while I'm still in my infusion. We have the conversation and she's like, I can help you take care of that deductible. Right? We're going to apply for a grant. Who knew that such a thing even existed? I had no idea. Had no idea. But because I had this daily practice rooted in trust and faith, I knew that something would be presented, right? Yeah. And I would have that awareness, right, to notice it and then follow through.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's that question of not this is scary, but how, and just being aware of that. That's really interesting. How did the cancer that you went through inform your perspective on life? You talked about the money side. How did it change your perspective on life?
It's probably in a number of ways. There was definitely lessons around just being able to let go, right? And not be so resistant and retaliative, I think is the word that comes to mind. Because so many people, right? You have some individuals that reside in this camp that chemotherapy is poison, right? Now, of course, no doubt, it's going to wreak havoc with other parts and systems of your body, but you still have to decide, right? You still have to choose what your perspective is going to be. And my oncologist said something to me before we even started the infusions. He said, look, he says, I'm going to tell you something that you're probably not going to expect from an oncologist. I want you to forget everything you've ever been told about cancer and the treatments and the potential side effects. I want you to forget everything you've been told. I want you to forget everything that you've read, right? Everything that you've Googled, right? And the pictures that you've probably seen. I want you to forget it all. Let it all go and allow this experience to be whatever it is for you. What oncologist says that to you?
Yeah. But that, I mean, that for me, as a fan of Stoic philosophy, is acceptance, number one. You know, we make a choice and we can't really do much more. But also that Stoic principle of focusing on what you can control, right? You know, it's that element of saying, and you can look at it from a framework of any philosophy or any religion, but actually that element of saying, I've chosen to do this for the benefit of my own health. Right. What more can I do, really? I've just got to accept where I sit. Christine, I'm really fascinated by that. But the bit I was a bit curious about is, and this is something that I've been thinking about, because we all bring this life experience, and the work that we do is about helping our clients to go on their journey. how do you use that life experience, but make sure that you're not bringing too much of it to make assumptions about somebody else's life? Because I think I probably struggle with that every now and again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So here again, right? Doing work around self-awareness and being vigilant and staying present, right?
Yeah.
For them, right? So it's learning how to be a better listener, right? I've even had one client tell me, it was towards the end of her session, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I just rattled on for the last 50 minutes, and you only spoke for maybe 6 of those 50 minutes, and in those 6 minutes, what you said was so relevant and so impactful." Right?
Yeah.
But look at the weight. That's what really stuck out in my mind, was the weight. How much time was allocated towards me being the listener versus
100%.
speaking.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Chris, I'll even ask the individual for permission, right? Because I'll say to them, what you're talking about, what you're sharing, and I thank you for what you're sharing, because I know it's not easy. And in the spirit of sharing, would you be okay? Because there's something that comes to mind that I went through that might be helpful for you, but I don't want to make any assumptions. Would it be okay if I shared?
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing. It's like, I'm not going to assume that I'm right. I'm not going to assume that my perspective is relevant, but let me share something that might start a conversation that might be useful, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk about the work. Tell me a little bit about the work you do with clients. Where does it start and where does it go? And tell me a story that would really help me and everybody in What Happens Next understand the work you do.
Okay. So if I had to describe it, I'll try and describe it first and foremost in the most concise way that I can, right? So it's basically, what I'm doing is I'm teaching people, I'm teaching them how to forgive themselves. And we'll get to that, what that means, right? So I'm teaching them how to forgive themselves so that they can either find or regain a sense of clarity, a sense of confidence, right? And that could be attached to worthiness. It usually is, right? But so I teach them how to forgive themselves so that they can either find or regain that sense of clarity and confidence, and then refocus on what is truly important, right? What truly matters, right? So that's really, right? That's the progression.
Yeah.
That's the progression. And it doesn't matter if I'm working with an individual, like let's say it's an individual that just came through a rather tumultuous divorce, or I'm working with a CEO that can barely stand the idea of retirement, right? And even though he knows he's on the precipice of it, right, the vastness and the scope of it is daunting, right? So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? It's typically the same progression. So that forgiveness piece, Chris, what I liken it, I refer to it as forgiveness. It's really doing the work around bringing to light, right? Learning to pay attention and look at all of these self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? That we've carried, or that the individual has been carrying for their entire life.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Right? So it's bringing what is mostly subconscious or operating at that unconscious, even passive level, and bringing it to light so that you can look at it and then address it.
Yeah.
Right? Because go ahead.
help me understand a little bit about how that process works, because some of these beliefs have been around in our lives and in our clients' lives for many years. So where do you normally start?
Just process wise, we take a trip back in history, right? We go back in time, and we dig into an individual's memories, right? Their money memories, their money history, their money biography, right? Yeah. We look at the individuals that were of significant influence as we were growing up.
Yeah.
Right? What do we remember about them? What were their characteristics, their personality? What were their tendencies, whether it was around money or their work, right? Or something else, right? What were those? Because those were the patterns and beliefs, right? The belief and behavioral patterns that were being modeled to us that we didn't even know we were taking on.
So let's talk a little bit about that element of our role models from this generation, where they've lived a fairly industrial, like they worked for 35 years and then stop. What do we need to do to think about our lives in a different way, particularly because of the changing world?
Yeah. Well, and okay, so I'm going to go with what just jumped into my mind as you were saying that. All right. And it's what I'm noticing, right? What I'm noticing as I'm working with clients. And they do come from these generations that you speak of. Really, our generation, because we were the ones that were raised, right, by these. Because my father was a factory. He was a steel worker, right, steel worker, blue collar steel worker. Came out of the military, and you're absolutely right. This is what he was counseled. Do this, right? Head nose to the grindstone. Yeah. You work hard, you earn a good living, right? Nothing was ever talked about in terms of enjoyment, right? What are you doing? What are you doing to feed your soul, type of thing? And how are you balancing that with the work that you are choosing to do in order to earn that paycheck?
Yeah.
So what I'm noticing, I have this online assessment tool, the Money Types quiz, right? They're archetypes. So they're just money archetypes. And there's 8 of them. And based on your response, I will get a read on what these underlying patterns are that are influencing your relationship with money and how you go about making decisions and living life.
So tell me a bit about those archetypes. What are they?
Well, so I'll just list them, right? So we have the innocent, the victim, the warrior, the martyr, the fool, the creator artist, the tyrant, and the magician.
Okay.
I got all 8. So while you and I are talking about, living well, and I just said something to the effect of what I think is missing, what I'm noticing is missing, and partly in our generation and those before us. And now, of course, we are patterning the same to our kids, or potentially are. That missing component is really the magician money type. So when I'm receiving these assessments, magician is low. It's usually the lowest. And the magician money type is actually the ideal money type. And the reason...
Tell me about what a magician money type looks like.
Yeah. So the magician, you can see me squirm because I'm like, oh, it's my favorite. So the magician money type. So and I do want to emphasize that this is the ideal money type. So we want this money type not just to be of active influence, but of primary influence. All right. So the magician money type is rooted in the present moment, always.
Right.
It has no attachment to fear, meaning all lessons, right? All trials and tribulations, all wounds that we took on in the past, everything has been learned and let go of, and only informs the present moment. but not from a place of fear. Right? It's kind of like that, been there, done that, I know better. Right?
Yeah.
Versus I'm afraid of repeating past mistakes. That's another money type.
Yeah.
Okay. The magician money type is also has no attachment to the future. Right? So there's no anxiety. And again, there's no fear. There's no worry. There's really no concern, because the magician is steeped fully in faith and trust, right? Knowing that he or she is always protected and will always be provided for in some way. Okay. Doesn't mean that we are devoid of having to take action, but it's that faith and trust that is informing what we do. And
you're talking about faith and trust in ourselves, right? You know, there might be a spiritual element.
Yes, there's absolutely.
But actually, for somebody who's as spiritually deep as a puddle like me, Christine, I need to translate this into a language I understand. You know what was really interesting though? I've just finished reading Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Oh.
And I even though some of the spiritual stuff wasn't aligned with my beliefs, and I don't espouse anybody like I'm all about you living a life that makes you happy regardless of what you do. So like this is just the way that I viewed it. But I think there was a real strong message about living in today, in the power of now, that regardless of what you believe, you can take on and live a better life because of. What do you think?
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. But of course, how do we do that? Right. It takes work to be in that present moment, which I know I'm familiar with that book, and he touches, upon that, right? There's various practices and processes to help bring ourselves back into that present moment, because whether we're talking about psychology or neuroscience or whatever the science is, there's scientific documentation that shows that we are less in the moment, far less in the moment than we are otherwise, right? We are typically either back there or out there, right? We're either backwards or forwards, but hardly right here.
And the that magician archetype is
right here.
Where we are today.
Yes.
Where we are today.
Yeah.
And that's where life's lived, right?
Wait, say that again. That's where what?
That's where we live our best lives. We're actually focused on what we're doing today.
Yeah. Do you know why? Do you know why that's where we live our best life?
No.
Okay.
What do you think?
So the reason why, right? Because when we are in the present moment, that is when we are in alignment with what matters most.
Yeah.
With what truly matters, right? And we can access it. We can connect with it. We can allow it to inform the choices we make and the actions we take.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so interesting. So somebody like me who would love to be a magician, but is probably too future focused to truly admit, and I need to do your quiz, by the way, to work out what archetype I am. But for somebody who's future focused, who's a planner, is always focused on for other people and for himself what's going to happen in the future. But with the realization that I'm probably going to be all right, I'm quite comfortable with that, but I'm still looking forward quite a lot. How do I get closer to that magician mentality?
So it's really two things, right? So we have to look at the other money types, right? So what are the other patterns that are exhibited by these other money types? Yeah. What are the patterns that are getting in the way of the presence of you being able to connect and be present with your inner magician, if you will? Right. So here again, right, we're talking, there's that forgiveness piece, right? Allowing yourself to look at the patterns, whether they're belief patterns or behavioral patterns, that are getting in the way of you experiencing your inner magician.
Yeah, interesting.
Right. So there's that piece. And then once you're brought through that process, because there is a whole process to that, a methodology behind that, then begins the work of addressing those patterns. And then ultimately what my clients end up asking me is, okay, I want to learn how to bring it forward even more, right? Because your inner magician is going to come forward quite naturally, almost organically, as you are addressing the limiting beliefs, right? Those patterns that are getting in the way.
Yeah.
Because now you're just making space, right? You're allowing the tendencies and all those wonderful characteristics of the magician to come forward. But a lot of people still don't recognize their own inner magician. And that's where values clarification comes into play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what I mean when I ask someone, when we talk about refocusing on what is truly important and what truly matters, what are we talking about? We're talking about our core values.
Yeah. What's important, what's truly important to you. Yeah. I was thinking about the experience that I had while I was away, funny enough. So literally just come back with my wife and my daughter, my youngest daughter, Sophie, just come back from Iceland. And we wanted to see the Northern Lights, didn't get to see the Northern Lights, unfortunately, because they were a bit temperamental like that. I mean, I don't know why they don't just come on.
Right.
But no, didn't see the Northern Lights, but it's a very beautiful country. And we had an experience where we went out to this, because Iceland's full of it's called the land of fire and ice, because actually it's volcanic, but it's sort of up near the Arctic Circle, so it's also really cold. But there's loads of these hot springs that pop up that you can go to, and we wanted to try and find the most remote one possible. Right? So we drove out a couple of hours out of Reykjavik to try and find this remote hot spring. Ended up just at a place that we thought we were completely lost, because it had one hut and then a road up into this hot spring that was basically in the middle of a farmland with a mountain in the background. And me and my youngest, who's 13, was literally sitting in this hot spring, just mucking about, right? Just being silly, being dad and daughter and stuff like that. And when you talked about being present, that's what felt the most present to me through the entire trip. Just being there in this natural environment and just connecting with somebody I love very much, but in a way that didn't involve technology or didn't involve, like, all of that felt to me like magician behavior.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because you look at it and you go, what did we need? What did we actually need? We didn't need, look, I'm really grateful that, I'm thankful and grateful that I've got the financial resources to take trips like that with my family. And it's something we encourage our clients to do quite a lot. But actually the simplicity of that experience, no technology, no emails, no, just sitting in a field, in a puddle basically of hot water, Christine, connected with my daughter, was amazing, and something that will be a really enduring memory for me.
Yeah.
And it's, how do we have more experiences like that?
Well, okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, and I think will answer what the question you just posed, right? So you being able to tap into, to really be in that present moment, what were you believing about yourself in that moment?
I think it aligns, and I agree with you. I think life is, and actually, when I'm thinking about the work we do, what happens next, yes, it's about having work with purpose and doing stuff that makes us happy. But there's two elements that I was thinking about in that sort of time. I believe that life's there to be enjoyed. So literally, we were telling silly jokes and, throwing stones and seeing if it would bounce off a rock, like really simple childlike stuff, but just fun. Just having a lot of fun at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
That was part one. And then just gratitude was the other feeling. So it was knowing that I'm lucky enough to spend time with the people I love and like, having really unique, novel experiences like that. I know I'm fortunate to do.
Yeah.
They were the emotions that, in hindsight, I was probably like just feeling at the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you were able to feel all those feels, right? The fun and the connection and the joy and the gratitude, right? Because you chose to believe that you deserve to be there.
Yeah.
Right? That you were worthy. I'm worthy of this time with my family. I'm worthy of this connection. I'm worthy of joy.
Yeah.
Right? And this fun.
Yeah. And talk to me a little bit about that, because that's interesting. And one of the things that I'm grateful for is learning through we've talked quite a lot about learning through the work we do with our clients.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing to me is, I've seen it, and I'm sure you have too, of people turning around and going, I need to continue that cycle of work despite having enough.
Yes.
And how do we, if it, for a lot of our clients, they come to us to help them work out how much is enough. But then I suppose the part of the puzzle is, if they don't think they're worthy of that time, how do we get there? So where does that self-worth come from? And what can we do as a logical next step to get closer to it?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Illogical. I don't think it's illogical. Right? Next step. It really is, right? It really is. My mother used to tell me, and she said this to me before one of my divorces. She said, you will know what to do, right? When the pain of either staying or leaving, like the pain of one will exceed the other.
Yeah.
Right. And then you will pick the lesser of, type of thing. So you're making me think of these two. Okay. Well, it was a conversation I just had yesterday. But it's also connected with a former client of mine, both CEOs. So the woman that I spoke with yesterday, she's new in the CEO role, just 6 weeks in, about my age, 6 weeks in. And what she's describing to me as she's navigating each day reminded me of my client, who is also a CEO, but the one that was afraid of just even entertaining the thought of what happens next around retirement.
Yeah.
Right. And I can see her setting herself up for the same life that he's trying to exit. Right. And it's this life where it's like, oh, how did he describe it? He was like, I've spent the last 40 years no longer being in control of my calendar and my time, literally going ping, 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 ping from one place to the next, one meeting to the next. And my purpose and my vibrancy and my relevancy was defined by my hair having to be on fire, right? If my hair wasn't on fire, then I wasn't doing enough. Right. And now I see this new CEO, and she's exhibiting similar patterns. Right. So I'm like, oh boy, this is interesting, right? Super interesting. And the work. So back to the CEO that's been doing this for 40 years. Now what he says is, I don't want that anymore. So first and foremost, I think, right, the thing that has to happen is we have to recognize that there's something that we don't want anymore. Something's not working anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the way he phrased it was, I want to experience Zen.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, I'm not even quite sure how I would describe it, but whatever I've read about it and whatever I've, heard about it, it seems to be something that would be worthwhile.
Yeah, interesting.
But he knew it's going to require him to begin to slow down.
Yeah.
Right. And that whole slowing down, and there's a whole process around that, right? Allowing yourself to slow down. And when you're recognizing that you're not allowing yourself to slow down, having a framework, like even a line of questioning that you can take yourself through to help you do just that.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's really interesting because that goes back to a question I've been thinking about quite a lot, which is, what does a life well lived mean?
Yeah.
And I know you've been thinking about it quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had a lot of conversations about this too. And what does success look like? Because I think sometimes we get this societal perception of success that's about power and about money.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether it makes us as happy as we could be in the longer term. What do you think?
Yeah, which piece? The living well? What do I believe is
yeah. What's a life well lived?
Yeah, what's a life? Oh my gosh. I probably have a list of things, right? Gosh. A life well lived could be something like having been able to release yourself of pressure, right? The pressure to be this or look like this or have this, right?
Yeah.
It could be something, as simple as knowing that enough is everything, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you a visual around this, because this is even something that I find myself having to take myself through, like on repeat. And this is where comparisons come into play, right?
Yeah.
And we all do this, right? We'll compare ourselves, to one another. And it's not, and I don't know about you, but when I compare myself to others, or someone will question, they'll ask me, well, don't you want more? And then it makes me doubt what I, not even so much what I have, but what I am.
Yeah.
Right. Like all of a sudden I'm questioning, wait a minute, I thought I was really content. Should I not be content? Should I be wanting, more? Right. And sometimes just slowing down, closing your eyes and doing a mental scan of every piece of your life and everything that you have and everything that you're contributing to, and right, the conversations that you're immersed in and the joy that you derive out of all of that. All of a sudden it clicks and it's like, I have enough, I am enough, and that is everything.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the point you raise is really interesting, because I think that more question, I think you're right. Once you know you've got enough, you've then got the free. What it provides me, and hopefully what we provide clients, is clarity of independence, because then they can choose whatever they want to do with their lives, right, knowing that they've got enough within their own framework of what enough looks like, because it's different for us all, right?
Yeah.
And I think that then allows you to turn around and say, what do I actually really want to do with my life? Because that's the question, isn't it? And that might, I think that evolves over time, but I think it's really interesting. You know what I'm really curious about on your quiz? The magician's the ideal. And what do most people come out as? what's the archetype that most people are, and tell me a little bit about that one.
Okay. So it really depends on what's going on in their world, right? What's going on in their life.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about somebody, I'm going to use the example of an individual who is just on the other side of a major life transition, and that transition was divorce. Okay. And there's a whole lot of what happens next, right?
Yeah.
Line of questioning associated with that.
Yeah.
But typically what I see is, and I remember I ran a list. I took you through the list of all the money types. So what I see is typically a primary influence is the innocent money type. And what might be in close second could either be the martyr or the fool. Okay. So with the innocent, right? How can you recognize the innocent? If you recognize the innocent, if that individual has a tendency to becoming overwhelmed quite easily, right? They find themselves in a state of overwhelm very easily. And then when they're in that state of overwhelm, they become indecisive, right? They become indecisive. You might even notice a fear-based response, like you're familiar with that fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
Right. So if you notice, especially on the planning side, right? Because I work with planners too. What they'll tell me is, I can't get so-and-so to complete X, right? Or Y. And then I know typically, especially if I'm coaching them on a parallel track, I'll know what's going on and what's feeding that behavior. Right. And they're in freeze mode. So they're afraid of something. So innocents have a tendency, they don't want to look. They don't want to look at the numbers. They don't want to deal with the numbers. They would rather seek to be rescued by someone else. And sometimes the rescuer is you, Chris, the advisor, right? The planner could take on, that role. So as the advisor and as the coach, we want to help them to step back into and reclaim.
Well, right?
Yes, exactly.
How much of that,
independence?
And this is the interesting thing. How much of that is because of the power dynamic of the marriage they've just exited?
Yep. Yes. Yeah, because typically, so I can say typically, it's not 100%, but from what I've seen, when as I'm listening to the individual describe their ex, the tendencies and the patterns that they're describing are that of the tyrant, are usually that of the tyrant. So the tyrant is controlling, they're critical, they're judgmental, right? They too are fearful, but they express it in a different way, right? Because when someone's controlling, that's fear.
Yeah.
Right? That's a fear-based behavior. Most tyrants suffer from chronic not enoughness. So even though they may be financially successful, which most of them are, they're the ones that hold fast and tight onto money because they're afraid that they could lose everything.
But here's the interesting thing. Because we've got a quiz on what happens next. Our one is based around the framework of well-being. So looking at well-being at that stage of our lives. And it's interesting how that sort of plugs into the work you're doing, because what we sometimes find, and again, not like these are general trends based on people who've taken the quiz, is often the focus on financial well-being. So higher financial well-being in one area might mean a sacrifice in other areas. So what we typically see, Kristen, it's really interesting, is that we've had people with high levels across the board, and that's great to see because it seems to indicate that there's a degree of balance, particularly for men. And again, I don't want to stereotype too much. I'm just using the data we've got. They neglect social well-being and health over work and money.
Yeah.
And I think we get to a stage of our lives, and I'm thinking about the work we do with our clients. We get to a stage of our lives where we go, I need to get this balance right. But if you're always emotionally fearing that you haven't got enough, that's difficult, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then how do you be a true partner to the one that you're, that you're doing life with, And the interesting thing is, whether it's the innocent or the tyrant, they're both fearful, and they both really are coming from a place of lack and scarcity. They're just expressing it in different ways. But because you're expressing it in different ways, and most couples don't want to talk, right, especially about money, it makes it very difficult for them to see how alike they are.
Yeah.
Right? But respective of the innocent, and what I notice, right, the key lesson for the innocent is to find safety and security in the knowledge of their own capabilities, right? So that's the empowered, right? That's the empowered version of the innocent. And that's where, the infusion of the magician was allowed to step in, right?
I love that. So talk to me about couple dynamics, right? Because this is really interesting. So if you've got a couple, do you want two magicians, or again, you want two magicians?
Yeah, because what it means, so if in a couple dynamic, right? Because we're two individuals that make up a partnership, right? And the quality of the partnership is determined by the quality of each individual.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How they see themselves as an individual, and what they believe is possible for themselves, and then ultimately one another. And that's the basis, right, of the magician. So we want both parties to have a strong connection to their inner magician, right? Because their inner magician, think about it this way. I keep doing this. I keep pointing to my heart, because the magician is heart-centered, right? It's coming from a place of love. So if both individuals have the magician as their primary, their magician is of primary influence, that means that both parties are coming from a place of love, whether it has to do with conversations around money, or family dealings, household dealings, or their careers, whatever it may be, right? They're coming from that place of love. And
I've got a couple of daily practices that help me with that, because I'm not natural at that. So I need to do the work to help me get to that point. One is, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but we've mentioned it on What Happens Next before. One is trying to be intentionally kind. Because I'm 47 now, and when I was 40, I had an experience where I should have been kind to somebody I passed in the street, a homeless guy in London, and I wasn't. So I started a podcast with my daughter. This was 7 or 8 years ago, called The Kindness Project, where it was effectively people who were a lot kinder than me teaching me to be kind. And that resulted in a book, and that resulted in me learning to be kind. We raised a decent amount of money for charity through the project, and it worked really well. But that to me is knowing how lucky I am and sharing some of that luck is one practice that keeps me in now. I think the second one is gratitude. Just like knowing how lucky I am is the second one. And then I suppose the third one, and one that I've fallen out of habit of doing, but I need to get back to, is journaling. So just actually spending the time thinking about my day, thinking about now, instead of living in the future or the past. So what practices do you recommend if somebody wants to get closer to their magician? They know they're not naturally a magician, but they're looking at getting a bit closer. They come and see you, they do the work, they think about the stories they tell themselves about their lives, but then they're gone and they're living their life. what can they do to get a bit closer on a daily basis to that magician?
Yeah. Well, here's my journal. so it that's absolutely right. So that's a practice that is implemented during the wealth coaching engagement, and of course is encouraged as an ongoing practice.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What do you write in your journal? Not the details, just how do you frame it? Tell me a bit.
How do I frame it? I usually will. Okay, so of course we're coming from Christine personal, right? This is Christine the individual, not necessarily the wealth coach, right? But personally, because I am very much spiritually inclined. So I will typically do some type of prayer, set up very short, very, just to connect with, right? Just to connect with whatever anybody's word is, Holy Spirit, God, what have you. And then I go with whatever is top of mind. So are you familiar with automatic writing or stream of thought?
I am, but tell me a little bit about it for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah. Some people call them morning pages too, but morning pages or journaling or whatever you call it, the actual writing, automatic writing or stream of thought is where you put pen to paper and then you just start writing. Whatever comes to mind, you allow it to land. And don't be surprised if initially you come up against resistance. That's normal. You expect that because what you're really doing is opening up that channel, right? Where you just allow the thoughts, right, to come through. And it's a practice in non-judgment, right? Because the resistance is judgment, right? You're like, oh crap, what am I writing about? Is this something that I should be afraid of? What if I sound stupid? Like, who's going to read this? Nobody's going to read it. It's yours. But these are the crazy things that go on. So I tell people, even if it's complete gibberish, I don't know what I'm writing. I'm supposed to be writing. I'm not allowed to take my pen off the paper. And then before you know it, you're back into that regular stream of thought. And it's amazing. If you do allow yourself to go back and read, you'll be surprised at how, I don't know, insightful, powerful the words are that landed. And it all came through you.
I love that. Absolutely love that. So journaling is the big thing. Right. Yeah. Tell me about what somebody should look for. So somebody doesn't need somebody like me. They don't need a technician. They don't need a financial planner to build them a cash flow plan or do any of that. But they're really interested in exploring their relationships with money, the stories they tell themselves about money. And because of this conversation, they want to be more magician. I want that on a T-shirt so much. I might organise that. But next time you see me, if I haven't got my Be More Magician T-shirt,
Be More Magician, I love it.
Be More Magician, I like it. I'll do the quiz later, so I can find out what I actually am. But if somebody wants to help and support with that, tell me a little bit about how to find a wealth coach who's good, what to look for, what questions to ask, and how to get the help they need.
Yeah. So how to find the money types quiz? Is that kind of what you're...
Well, if they need some help just getting to the emotional side of what they're aiming to achieve, where do they find the right person?
Yeah. So you do want to look for somebody, I believe, right? Ideally, that is a certified money coach.
Yeah.
Right. So that and certified money coach, that curriculum is taught through the Money Coaching Institute, right? Yeah. Deborah Price, the founder and CEO. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I don't know how up to date her, find a certified money coach in your area, is, but certainly, in this day and age, we should be able to Google, right, and find someone, because here's the reality. I'm a wealth coach, certified money coach as well, and I sit inside of a financial firm. You would be hard pressed to find someone like me inside of a financial firm, right? Because when I talk to my other CMC colleagues that are right by you, like Dennis, right? Dennis Harkalakis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You know, when I have these conversations all over the globe, you know, they're asking me, how did you do it? How did you get yourself inside of a firm? Because it's not the norm.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the norm. So you will find that you have to do a little bit of research, right? And kind of, you know, digging around. But certified money coach, yes. If especially relative to the money types, if that's something of interest and that resonates and you want a little bit more information, that's the Money Coaching Institute. Yeah.
And where can we do the quiz?
Okay. So the quiz you can find on our website, noteadvisor.com.
Yep.
Noteadvisor.com. And if you go to resources, you'll see the drop down. It'll take you right to the quiz.
Fab. I'm doing that as soon as we finish this interview, and as well as ordering my Be More Magician t-shirt. Where can people find out a little bit more about you, Christy?
The best place is going to be on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. LinkedIn. I don't remember what that profile address is, other than if you search for me, make sure you got the correct spelling, that Mathieu. It is French. So make sure you have the correct. And I'm wearing a bright pink top. My hair looks like this. My glasses look like this. So you should be able to recognize me, you know, easily. It might even have my middle initial, but.
On this channel, and when we put this out on the podcast, we'll put a link so that people.
Beautiful. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Brilliant. I've loved this conversation, and
thank you.
With full disclosure, normally we prepare people by giving people a framework of questions, but because I've been sitting in puddles in Iceland, I didn't have the opportunity to do that today. However, I've really enjoyed the way this has gone, and I think it's led to a really open environment where we can share a lot of useful stuff. So, Christine, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you. Thank you.
And I hope everybody watching or listening, you've really enjoyed it.